Hello and welcome back to the Sideline. I'm Rory Jones, and today I'm going to be reacting to some of the biggest headlines across the NFL. For this episode, I'm joined by Ben Isaacs, one of the leading voices in the NFL's UK community, as a writer, editor, broadcaster, and also, of course, a podcaster. So, first of all, Ben, welcome to the Sideline. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm doing great. It's, NFL season is practically upon us. I find most of preseason unwatchable. Useful nuggets in there, but in general, I'm not one of those sickos that's like, oh, I can't wait to start watching these preseason games. I mean, I watch, but I kind of watch sort of through gritted teeth.
Well, what's actually brilliant is the fact that 1 month today is when the new NFL season will kick off. What I'd like to start by talking about is one of the kind of lesser known topics, I suppose. I don't think it's been talked about a lot in the UK at all. I don't know if you've ever heard of a former rugby player called Louis Rees-Zammit. He actually segued into the NFL. Um, Obviously attracted a lot of media attention here in the UK over the last 18 months. But notably, of course, as of last week, he has announced his decision to leave the NFL and return back to rugby union, ending his 18-month stint in the NFL. What was your initial reaction to this news?
Um, yeah, I have heard of him. I think we might have actually been born in the same hospital, believe it or not. Um, when the news broke, I woke up that morning and it was the first thing I saw, and I was very disappointed. Um, I wasn't super surprised. I was a little bit surprised by the timing. I thought he was likely to finish training camp. There was nothing that made me think he was going to be, on the active roster at any point next season. There was so much was misunderstood when he was put on the quote unquote active roster months back. And I had to tell the non NFL media over and over again that the phrase active roster means nothing at the moment. It only
Yeah,
means something during the season. But I get when you're not, if you don't know the NFL, active roster sounds like, oh, okay, he's going to be playing rather than
sounds exciting, doesn't
there's
it?
exactly. And I think especially in the Welsh media, they were kind of excited by this. Um, and of course, everyone at NFL UK is super excited, but I'd like to think they know the active roster means nothing at that point. Um, but clearly, it has not gone well for him there. I don't think many people were going into this season having much confidence that he was going to be playing in the regular season at all. When he was in preseason last year, he looked slow and he seemed like he lacked explosive speed. That's the most important thing. That explosive speed coming off the line of scrimmage, trying to hit the line of scrimmage, he could not do that. He didn't look particularly strong, and he is a strong in terms of rugby. He is physically
It's a
strong,
big lad.
and he is fast. He is
Yeah.
exactly, but you put him on an NFL field against people who have been playing the game for much longer than him, and he was always going to have a mountain to climb. I'm I've got so much time for the fact that he put himself out there and he did something that was probably going to end in failure, but that he would have known, well, I gave it a go. And there's not many things worse than kind of looking back in life and thinking, oh, why didn't I try that? Why didn't I have the bravery to try that? And he did. And I'm sure there are some people who feel like, oh, look, he's coming back with his tail between his legs. And, you can say that because unfortunately, the plan failed. He didn't take a regular season snap. He was, barely on any active roster. It's sad for him, but I think we all know deep down, having seen what he looked like in training camp and what he looked like in preseason last year, that this was inevitable. I just thought it was likely to happen in January of 2026 rather than, a few days ago.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's certainly quite a lot to unpack there, isn't there? I mean, I think definitely from Louis Rees-Zammit's own perspective, he seems to have put quite a positive slant on it with regards to his kind of future in rugby. I mean, in his own statement, he mentioned it's been a great experience, but it's time to come home. I've decided that this is the best time to make this decision to give myself a time to get everything in place for next season. Obviously, meaning the rugby season, not the NFL season anymore. But mentioning that this has been on his mind, coming back to rugby, he's described that as what he does best, and he's expressed a lot of excitement there. I do somewhat agree with you. It seems to have ended quite soon. 'Cause when you think about it, he's only really played the sport for a year properly, and it's obviously such a huge challenge for a rugby player to transition to the NFL. And I fully agree with you in seeing him in the preseason as well. I think his stats were in 3 games. He was averaging around 3.7 yards per carry as a running back, which isn't great, especially in preseason. I feel like it didn't really have the desired outcome from his standpoint. Do you feel like there is a positive way of looking at it in terms of at least taking that step and perhaps inspiring future generations of players in the UK who might want to emulate him and maybe have a bit more success on the pitch?
I hope it does, but compared with if he had become a kind of a roster player, and let's say he was never a starter, but he was someone who had like a 6 or 7 year career in the NFL, played for a couple of teams, made some money, had some moments, that would have been absolutely huge. We probably never would have heard the end of it. Like, Welsh rugby is in such a bad state that he missed one Wales win in the entire time that he's been gone, which is pretty remarkable. And that was only like, yeah, and that was only a couple of weeks ago that they had that one win. So Welsh rugby has clearly missed him. But when he made the announcement that he was going to try out for the NFL, my thought was this is a disaster for Welsh rugby and potentially rugby in general. Because Welsh rugby is in such a bad state, if you're a kid of, say, 14, 15, and you are a high-level rugby player, and you're on the pathway to be a professional rugby player, right now, there are 4 professional clubs in Wales, and they don't know if they're just going to cut 2. And that limits your employment opportunities. You'll want to play rugby for Wales, so if you're not playing for one of those clubs, then you're out of luck. If he'd been a success, how many of those 14 and 15-year-olds would think, do you know what? Why don't I try NFL Academy? Instead of going the rugby route, I can do NFL Academy. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. There's the possibility that I can get an education in the US. I can get a scholarship to the US, and who knows what could happen after that. Maybe I can make an NFL roster. Who knows? If he'd been a success, I think there could have been an influx of talented rugby players who were physically set up for the sport, who would have been playing the sport at a younger age than he did. And although it would have been, the effects of that would have been most pronounced in Wales, we would have seen that effect all across the UK. To see a star young rugby player go off and do that and have some success, there would have been kids, from every corner of the UK who think, I want to do that. And NFL Academy, I think, would have been inundated. The NFL Academy has been fantastic anyway, and is a separate conversation because it's different to the international player pathway. But I think it really would have sent a lot of kids there. And now you might find some kids who think, oh, well, look, he was one of the best players in the world and he couldn't make that transition. Maybe it's not for me if I haven't grown up with it. That's my fear, that it will put some kids off because it didn't end the right way for him. And he's obviously trying to put a positive slant on it. But if he had any chance of making that roster, or if his agent had said, well, look, we don't know if we're going to get on the roster in Jacksonville, but Team X is already making inquiries about you if you are in the cuts in training camp, I see no reason why he wouldn't have stayed.
No, 100%.
Like, any chance of staying on, you don't leave now. This is you being like, I know what's going to happen. This is you knowing that your partner is trying to end the relationship, and you think, okay, well, look, the lease on the flat is up at a certain point. I'm just going to do it now, rather than get myself in. He knew it was coming, and it's sad, but the whole thing of like, oh, good news, rugby fans, I'm coming back. I mean, I'm sure he's had through his agent an offer.
Multiple, apparently.
Yeah, so it's not the sort of money he could have made in the NFL. So yeah, it's a shame, but if I was involved in rugby right now, I would be breathing a big sigh of relief.
It's not just UK as well. When you think about rugby players trying to make it in the NFL, we have quite a few from Australia. I mean, this story I think is just fascinating from a number of angles. I think at first when I saw the news, what was it, the start of 2024, um, I was kind of quite cynical. I think, we've seen Jared Hayne, for instance, from the NRL, was an Australian player who I think was around 27, 28 at the time. I think he was older than Rees-Zammit is. He
Yes.
kind of tried making it in the NFL and obviously did have one or two preseason performances, which were quite promising. I think a lot of rugby fans saw preseason, thought that was a regular season, and got pretty excited. But we've seen a few players. I mean, Christian Wade was another one, obviously coming over from England a few years ago. I think that was 2019. And I think he kind of bounced around. I think he was on the Bills practice squad for a while, so he was able to, stick around at least, even if he didn't perhaps make regular season appearances. But I think with Rees-Zammit, I think this is by far, no disrespect to the other names on this list, but it's by far the highest profile I think of any of these players, and also at such a young age for a rugby player. I think he was 22 when he announced he was leaving the sport for good, basically, to join the IPP and see what he could do in the NFL. I think it is slightly a shame the fact that it didn't really work out the way people perhaps wanted it to. But yeah, I think one point that you kind of touched on, I think, is the fact that it's such a difficult sport to learn, and kind of it takes so many mental reps and so much time. It's so exhaustive to just get to grips with the sport at all. And the fact that he had such a short time frame to do that, I think perhaps made it more difficult. I think you look at some of the players who are perhaps going through the NFL academy, or they're trying to get scholarships over in the US, and by the time they would make it to the NFL, they've probably had 4 or 5 years of exposure to the sport versus just this fast track where it's 6 to 9 months going from 0 to 100 and trying to make it in the league.
Yeah, and bear in mind as well, he did grow up watching the sport. He grew up in an NFL mad household. His dad played amateur American football. I want to say it was the Cardiff Tigers. So it's not even like he kind of caught a few glimpses on Sunday nights and thought, oh, I could do that, surely. It's just you put some pads on and you run around with the ball. Like, and there is a big, big difference between someone who has watched the sport a lot and is trying to learn a playbook. So, yes, he had an advantage over someone, I think, like a kind of a Christian Wade, where he thought, look, I'm going to try my luck. Like rugby, he was past his best and he wasn't a superstar.
He
Whereas
was
Louis
older as well.
Rees-Zammit,
He was like
yeah,
28, 29.
yeah, which is like next to impossible. Next to impossible to try and pick up something at such an elite level. Because obviously the NFL is they're the net whatever the next best league is after the NFL is not even in the conversation. At least with something like the NBA, you can say there are European leagues that are a decent standard and that they send players to the NBA. They get drafted, but it's a little bit like, oh, I've never played football before, and I'm going to try and play in the Premier League. If Louis Rees-Zammit, as someone, in terms of the international player pathway, for someone who has grown up watching the sport, understands the sport, is physically gifted, but he couldn't do it, it just shows how hard it is for everybody. And I think if you are a lineman, and I'm not including kickers and punters here because that is, in comparison, that is very easy compared with trying to be an NFL running back or wide receiver. We have seen countless international kickers and punters. It's basically not the same sport in terms of the conversation. But if Louis Rees-Zammit, someone as gifted as him, if he can't do it, I don't know if it'll make certain people be a bit hesitant about going into the international player pathway if they have other options. And obviously he did have other options. I don't know what he was earning at Gloucester, but it would be very small compared with what he could earn in the NFL if things went okay. I don't even mean well. I'm not talking like 20 million a year. I'm just talking like if they went okay, he's making more money. He's missed the Lions tour, which would have been very lucrative for him in terms of sponsorships and all that sort of stuff. And you would imagine he would have been playing in that Lions tour and he would have, had
Definitely.
that glory of doing that, which off the field means so much more can be earned. If you're decent in the NFL and you're a really good rugby player, the money in the NFL is going to be such an
So
inducement.
yeah,
And there are always going to be people who think, okay, I can give this a go. It's worth trying it. But the next Louis Rees-Zammit, he might not. He might think I'm onto a good thing here. And it might be the Christian Wades who think I'll just roll the dice. That I haven't got much left in rugby. If I can get one NFL contract and I can just hang around on that roster and maybe I get to live in Florida for a few years and make good money, then I'll do it. But the superstars, the people who are going to be playing on Lions tours and all that sort of thing, I think they're going to think long and hard about this sort of thing now.
I think it's definitely yeah. It's almost like a kind of rude awakening, I guess, for anyone who kind of does. I mean, you mentioned Reece Zammit, someone who obviously played rugby at a high level his whole life, but comes from a family that really closely followed American football, and you're kind of thinking. And I'm pretty sure when he did run a 40-yard dash, I know it wasn't at the official combine, but I think he still ran like one of the fastest times. So, he had the speed. Obviously he's a big lad. I mean, he was pretty formidable on the rugby pitch. And I think to see that it's just different levels, isn't it? When you see him, compared to some of the people in his position. I think especially when he switched from running back to receiver, and you're comparing him to the Justin Jeffersons of the world, the Jamar Chasers of the world, the Tyreek Hills, it's almost just like a completely different category, I suppose.
Yeah, what it made me think of was because the way that when it comes to rugby, when Louis Rees-Zammit's got the ball in his hand and the way he can beat people, you want to try and replicate that on an NFL field. Now, one of my favourite players ever is Devin Hester. And Devin
Oh wow,
Hester is
Chicago
the
Bear
best
legend.
return player of all time. I was lucky. I was at a Bears game last season where they were kind of honouring him. Um, he did manage to swear in his announcement, which was great. But the Bears never quite got a handle on how to use him in the offense. Because when he was returning those kicks, he's going full speed and he can make moves and make people miss, which is a lot more like playing on the wing in rugby than it is being a wide receiver or a running back. So they would try to develop these plays that made sure he got the ball in his hands for short passes and then try to replicate what he would do in the open field on a kick or punt return. And it's just a different thing. Like you're not working like getting up ahead of speed. You're surrounded by people. That was when he moved to wide receiver, and I thought, okay, are they trying to Devin Hester him? Because it didn't work with Devin Hester, who's the greatest of all time at doing that. And you look at other players who have been like Cordell Patterson, who was fantastic as a returner, but you only ever saw glimpses
Mm.
on offense in comparison. Looked like a very ordinary player on offense. And when it was Andy Reid, I thought Andy Reid might, because obviously they
That me too,
they
exactly.
signed him and they were happy to give him a bit of guaranteed money to make sure that they got him. And I thought Andy Reid has seen something here. And I'm not to say, oh well, it's absolutely going to work, but Andy Reid must have had some plans. And the fact that he didn't make it very far with the Chiefs, it made me think, okay, he's probably never
Absolutely.
going to, if it's not going to work with that coach in that setup, with that quarterback, it might not work anywhere. And it's not going to be like, oh, well, if it didn't work with Andy Reid, maybe it'll work with Doug Peterson. Like, no one has
The
ever
guy who
said
learned
that.
from
And
Andy Reid as well.
yeah. So, like, if he was going to be a wide receiver, I could only see him being like the poor man's Devin Hester wide receiver. And unfortunately, Devin Hester was no wide receiver.
Yeah. I guess you have one or two examples. You can see, like, say, Steve Smith, for instance, obviously started out as like a kick returner, ended up being incredibly useful in the offense. Obviously, as a Ravens fan, we capitalized on his twilight years as well as the menace that he was.
Once Steve Smith had like transitioned to wide receiver, it's like, oh, this guy's a wide receiver. He didn't ever feel like a returner pretending to be a wide receiver. It was like, oh, actually, he's a better wide receiver than he is a returner. Like
So,
Devin Hester was something special, and in terms of rugby, I think Louis Rees-Zammit is something special. And trying to fit that round peg into that square hole, it never really works. I would have loved to seen him be a Steve Smith. Like, Steve Smith, one of the most effective wide receivers of the last like couple of decades, really. But there are those players who start off on like, returning kicks and punts on special teams, and then it's like, you're too good to do this now. We don't want you taking those hits that you get in special teams.
I think it's just a different ball game, I guess. I mean, I think coming back to one other point you made that I definitely agree with. I think obviously following this from afar, Louis Rees-Zammit's journey. I mean, I don't think we had much choice as NFL UK fans as well in terms of how much coverage there was. But that was for me when he signed with the Chiefs. That for me was something of a turning point. I was pretty cynical early on. I was kind of thinking we've seen this happen before. We've seen the likes of the Jared Haynes. We've seen Christian Wade and a few other examples of players that tried to really make it in the NFL and it just didn't quite work out. I think when he signed with, as you mentioned, Andy Reid, an offensive-minded genius, really, he's almost like the kind of mad scientist of the NFL, I guess. So when he signs with him, and I was kind of thinking, okay, this is the guy who would use him in a way that perhaps we hadn't considered. He could be a useful gadget on the offense. I remember they changed the kickoff rule as well, I think, last season and
Yeah,
there was kind of some murmurings around could Louis Rees-Zammit be used in that sense. And he signed the contract, which I think rugby fans when they saw this got quite excited. A 3-year reported $2.83 million contract. I mean, that's a pretty big deal when you compare it to some of the Premiership contracts out there.
yeah.
So they don't know
But
about guaranteed money yet, though. So
no, exactly. Those of us who know the NFL would be like, right, okay, yeah, he's not getting that. That's
he's
that's
not seeing that
fine.
now.
What's the guaranteed money? And I lost count of the number of times, Rory, where I was on Welsh TV or Welsh radio, and they were like, he signed for 3 years, and he signed and he's getting like 2.8 million. I'm like, those numbers don't mean anything. They mean absolutely nothing. He's guaranteed a very small amount, comparatively speaking, and the rest of it is irrelevant. If they want to cut him, they can cut him, and it costs them nothing. It's just if he's good, he's locked down for that much. That's it. And Rory, I don't know if you saw the US coverage of him leaving. Did you see any of that?
I saw some of it. I saw the New Heights podcast reacting to it when he signed with the Chiefs because obviously I think that made it a bit more relevant. Which was ironic because I remember Jason Kelsey previously had said that he never thought a rugby player could make it in the NFL outside of my letter. But I didn't see a lot of the other coverage outside of that, to be fair.
Well, basically, when he decided he'd move back to rugby, I thought I'm really interested in the American perspective. And I searched and I searched, and it didn't even cause the smallest of ripples in America. It's somebody who's not going to make a roster has decided he's not carrying on. It's like in the world of the NFL, it's not even a story. It's it's big for us whether we like it or not. But the America this was the thing that fascinated me. They couldn't care less. It wasn't even worth reporting on. There's training camp stuff, and there's something about, a fourth string running back might have sprained their ankle. That is more important to the American media than Louis Rees-Zammit. Louis Rees-Zammit was an absolute irrelevance to them once the initial excitement of the story had died down, and once he'd stopped being paraded at Wembley, a game where he didn't even suit up for, and invited to the Super Bowl and kind of paraded around at the Super Bowl, and that's it. Like, the Americans didn't care. I think some of them thought it was a publicity stunt. I don't think it was a publicity stunt. I think it was all done in good faith, and you know, it
Didn't work
failed.
out.
But the lack of coverage was really quite incredible. Anywhere that did cover it was just they they just put his kind of release out there, and that was it. There was no kind of analysis. There was no sort of, does this mean we won't get foreign players coming to the NFL? There was no analysis of how you convert from one sport to another. It was just nothing. Someone not even good enough to make it to cuts, and that was sad that it didn't even merit analysis from the American media. Just, well, don't care, irrelevant.
I think you make an excellent point. I think it's just kind of that, like, yeah, it just wasn't really on their radar to start with. I think But coming back to some of the athletes that you're seeing every year in the draft, I mean, look at the amount of media attention you see around, like even like a Travis Hunter coming out this year. I mean, think of the coverage that he received versus, when you think of the caliber of athlete of like a Heisman winning, corner and receiver versus someone who's like very good rugby player, but sure, they've got plenty of those elite athletes, I guess, in the NFL, and I suppose this is almost like a stark reminder of that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that we're going to see situations, and it might be 10 years' time, but we see situations where kids from the UK, born and bred in the UK, who've gone to the NFL Academy, they've grown up watching the NFL, go to the NFL Academy, they get a scholarship to a good football school, and they get drafted. It doesn't have to be like a top 10 pick and a quarterback, but if we've got a handful of players in the league in 10 years' time who've come through that system, they've played college football, this isn't just a passing fancy and they played another sport and they're going to see what they can do. And I'm not talking punters and kickers here. I am talking the proper positions, that it would be the best thing ever. I mean, but can you imagine a quarterback? You imagine a quarterback who's like from Luton or
Yeah.
something, and he goes to, I don't know, Ole Miss, and he gets drafted in like the 4th round, and he's like the backup quarterback for the Saints, and the quarterback goes down injured, or they're way ahead,
It's
or
Tom
they're way
Brady one.
behind, and they pull him, and he comes on, and it's like he throws a touchdown pass. It's like, did you just see a kid from Luton do a touchdown pass at the Superdome? Like,
That'd
what
be amazing.
timeline are we living in? And I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there. And the international player pathway is a fun little thing, but the more I think about it, the less relevant it seems in terms of what we're going to see from the future. NFL Academy, I think, is brilliant. And at some point, we're going to see one of those kids in the NFL, and we should all feel really proud because he really will be one of us.
I believe there was a quarterback who came from the academy who just signed with a D1 school in the US. I think that was the first one. I've forgotten his
Yes.
name, but I mean that's something, isn't it?
If he ends up starting some games in Division 1 football, I am so here for that. He doesn't even have to get drafted. But to have him playing college football, and we're going to see more of it, and it will be absolutely thrilling. I can't wait to see more of it.
No, I definitely agree. I think the IPP personally, I think it's obviously good at preparing certain positions for the NFL. I know you don't regard them as being proper positions, but kickers and punters, especially when you look at I mean, as someone who plays Australian rules football, I mean, I know those guys seriously know how to boot a ball, and I think that's pretty transferable skills. So, I mean, you
Yes.
have, I mean, Australia can almost be like a breeding ground for kickers and punters all day, I guess. And then you've got linemen as well. I mean, when you've got someone who's like an athletic phenomenon, someone like a Jordan Mailata who's what is he 6'9", 300 plus pounds, like incredibly strong, an athlete of that caliber, I think that does kind of align quite nicely to what you want from an offensive lineman. But I think skill positions, you look at what the NFL Academy is doing in terms of getting so much experience for these young players so they can be exposed to the game, they can learn more of the nuances around it. I think that's how you develop stars of the future. I think I mean, one example I'd think of is blocking. I mean, Louis Rees-Zammit in his rugby career, sure, he knows what it feels like to have the ball in his hands and to be running at opposition players. But I mean, to be able to block, which is what you'd be doing, the unrewarded work for 90% of the time when other players are kind of in the limelight. It's skills like that which aren't you're not going to learn from rugby, and it'd be so new to you as someone who's exposed to American football as well.
I don't know if I'd want Louis Rees-Zammit blocking for me. Like if I'm there making a play, and this is like, say, week 1 of preseason, he's still around, and I'm thinking the only thing that's stopping me from getting my head knocked off by that safety is Louis Rees-Zammit making that block. I'm not feeling confident at that point. Like, and the lineman, it is absolutely true. Now, I think Maleta is such an outlier in how well he's done, because there'll be hundreds of rugby players around the world, whether it's in the UK, in the South Pacific, in Australia and New Zealand, who physically are built for it, but just can't develop the footwork. They were saying in the way that Jordan Mailata has been able to take that on and it just click with him so quickly and at such a high level. There might be some people who think, oh, well, look, if he can make that transition, so can I. Absolutely try it. But I think he's a bit of a freak mentally, not just physically, because I think those freak athletes are out there, but making that transition is so difficult because we've seen plenty of freak athletes on the offensive line get drafted in the top 5 picks who can't do it. You know, they can't set their feet properly against like elite edge rushers. So it is incredibly difficult still to make that transition, even with all those physical skills. And I don't want to denigrate the kickers and punters. The reason I was saying it the way I was saying it is because they don't need that much. They don't need to learn that much. If you're kicking conversions or you're kicking the ball out of your hand like you would do in Australian rules football or in Gaelic football, it's not a massive leap. And it's no wonder that now they've made an effort of getting like Irish lads who have been playing Gaelic sports and putting them on the international player pathway. What a surprise. They're getting NFL contracts because they're big, they're strong, and they've been kicking the ball out of their hands since they could pick up a ball. You know, you don't have to worry too much about the playbook. This is a skill that they have had since like the crib, basically. There's no reason why we shouldn't have half the NFL's kickers and punters from Australia and Ireland, frankly. You know, there are enough good ones out there. And I hope it means that more kids from the UK and Ireland who can do that think, okay, well, I'll give that a go. But the difference is that it won't sell seats at Wembley. It won't sell many jerseys, and it won't inspire the next generation quite as much. But the things that the Irish lads are doing who've come through the international player pathway has just been absolutely fantastic. And I think we're going to see more of that. Like you say, it is a transferable skill, and I'd have every confidence that more of those are going to come through. Just less confident with the lineman. I mean, I'm more confident with the lineman than I am with a running back coming through the IPP. But
Yeah.
even then, I worry about Jordan Mailata being the poster child for this when that might be unobtainable. That what he's done, it shouldn't have happened, right? Like he shouldn't be as good as he is. There is
I think
something
he's more of a unicorn figure,
yes,
kind of like,
yeah.
yeah.
You know, if you've been playing a sport like rugby since you were perhaps say like 9 or 10 years old, and it's so ingrained, and then you've got to unlearn parts of that and learn new things. It is really tough. You're right. Unicorn's the right word for him. But of course, it doesn't mean that anyone who comes through the international player pathway playing on the line that doesn't match his accomplishments has failed. You could still be making a roster and making a good living. You don't have to go all pro for it to be a success. Someone who has a 10-year career in the NFL has been a huge success. Even if they've got no rings, they've never had the biggest contracts, they've never been a star, and they've never been a regular starter. That is a success in a league that spits you out after a couple of years because it is one of the most physically demanding ways to make a living. If someone comes through that pathway, plays in the league for a decade, earns some good money, then they have done brilliantly, even if most people don't know their names.
Speaking of making good money, I think that's a nice segue into one story which is getting a lot of media attention in the US, not just because it's related to America's team, but Micah Parsons, the superstar defensive end of the Dallas Cowboys, all-pro player. I think he's been in the league 4 years. He's been a Pro Bowl player each of those 4 years. He's been an All-Pro, I think, twice in that time. He really is the Cowboys' defense, to be honest. And he has sensationally requested a trade in the last few days, following an alleged breakdown in contract negotiations. In a statement a few days ago, he said that I stayed quiet, but again, after repeated shots at myself and all the narratives, I've made the tough decision. I no longer want to play for the Dallas Cowboys. So huge news coming out of Dallas. We've seen the situation before with pass rushers specifically. We've seen Myles Garrett recently publicly requests a trade from the Browns, only to sign a contract extension a few weeks later. We've also seen Khalil Mack, though. I think it's 2018. He couldn't agree to an extension with the Raiders, and he basically ended up being traded in a blockbuster move to Chicago for, I think it was multiple first round picks.
Hmm.
Coming back to Micah Parsons, how do you see this one panning out? Do you feel like he could be the next Myles Garrett or the next Khalil Mack?
I think it's Miles Garrett. I don't think I don't think anyone is going to want to give up what was given up for Khalil Mack. Like Khalil Mack was decent value in what the Bears got out of him. In fact, there have been a lot of calls for the Bears to make this move again. There were a lot of parallels actually, because when the Bears did that, they had a rookie head coach who was an offensive minded coach. They had a really good, experienced defensive coordinator who was hungry to get new pieces. That is also relevant now. They had a quarterback starting his second season after an up and down first season. Again, this is there are so many parallels, and they made this move, and I think they won like 12 games and won the division. Then the next season with Khalil Mack, he ended up going on to be Defensive Player of the Year. It's a lot to give up, and I imagine it would take either multiple first round picks again for Micah Parsons, or a first round pick and an elite player going the other way. Like Micah Parsons is a young player. He's got so much football ahead of him. I I'm gonna take what he's saying at face value. I don't think he's doing this simply as a bargaining ploy, and that he's just thinking, okay, this'll get the Cowboys doing what I want them to do. I think he is fully prepared to walk away, and he loves the Cowboys. He grew up a Cowboys fan. I don't see any situation where he's traded. I think the Cowboys want him there much too much. I think they want him there even more than the Browns wanted Myles Garrett there, because they could easily have been like, well, we've got to reset completely anyway. We can help the rebuild by accumulating all these extra picks. The Cowboys always feel like they're in a championship window to themselves, whether they are or they aren't. And I think that Jerry Jones feels that while he's got Dak Prescott at quarterback, they are in a Super Bowl window. Taking Micah Parsons away, unless there is another elite rush player that's going to go there, they are out of that. They're out of that window. Micah Parsons is their best player. I think they will do whatever it takes to sign him. I cannot see him playing anywhere else. And if he does go somewhere else, then that team is probably an instant contender, because it's going to be a team that is already really good. I don't think it's going to be a Bears, like that sort of team. I think it has to be someone that's like, we are a player away, and the Bears are not a player away. If a team is a player away and gets Micah Parsons, then they are in the Super Bowl mix, and the Dallas Cowboys are looking to pick in the top 10. But let's say they make a deal, and it is a team that is a player away, and they make it to at least the conference championship game. Those 2 first-round picks you're getting, they are late picks. Those are not top 10 picks now. So would you rather Micah Parsons, or would you rather the 28th and 30th picks of the next 2 drafts? I'd rather Micah Parsons than those picks.
I think it is somewhat unthinkable in a lot of ways that they would let a player of his caliber leave the building. I think there's a few things that are interesting about this particular saga and how public it's been the whole time. I think there's something inherent about the nature of the Cowboys, the extent of media coverage they receive, and obviously Jerry Jones being the only owner that has pretty much his own press conference at every game. It's everything is always going to be played out publicly. But I think Micah Parsons as well, personally, he seems like quite a straight talking guy. I definitely get that vibe. I think when a Myles Garrett, I feel like it seemed like more of a shrewd, calculating move to kind of strategically put out that trade request. Okay, that's the kind of student side that's the more astute academic side of Myles Garrett there. And I think that was, a great move because you got a huge contract. I think with Micah Parsons to an extent, what if he is at this point just done with the team? What if he is kind of more stubborn in that at this point if the bridge has been burned? I do think though you look around the league and it's easy to see why he's so frustrated. I mean, looking at his peers, Myles Garrett, who we've already mentioned, I mean, this offseason he signed a 4-year extension $160 million, 40 million a year. TJ Watt as well, signing a 3-year, $123 million extension. So just slightly larger than Garrett's deal per season. That made him the highest paid non-quarterback ever. Even Max Crosby as well. I mean, I say even. I mean, I don't think he's quite as good as those players. Still elite in his own
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
but 3-year extension, $106.5 million. And then you've got Micah Parsons, who has been carrying the Cowboys defense. He led his team in sacks and tackles for a loss. He had 2 forced fumbles as well. Arguably the best defensive player in the league outside of perhaps Myles Garrett. You could argue he's at least as good as all of these guys, and he's set to make around $21.3 million this season. So compare that to what his peers are making.
Yeah.
They've got to get a deal done. It's a question of whether that's Dallas or whether that's someone else.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely deserves more. But the problem is that the market keeps shifting. And you can sign a contract at one point where it's like, yeah, this is great, this is top of the market. And then a couple of dominoes fall. And then it's, comparison is the thief of joy. If players didn't know what one another was earning, then you might feel different. If you just felt like, okay, well, I'm getting paid X amount and I have no idea what anyone else is getting paid and there was no way of knowing, you might feel it's fine. But that market gets shifted and all of a sudden you feel slighted because you see your peers earning so much more than you, but it happens to be that's when their contract was done. Micah Parsons does not want to wait for that to be, for it to kind of go to the last minute. He wants it done now. I get it. You want that security, and a lot of it is an ego thing. And
100%.
NFL players will have big egos and they are competitors and they will look at what other people are earning and they will get competitive. I think the Cowboys will do something. I just don't see how they can let him leave without accepting, okay, we're starting over. And I don't think you want to start over when you've got Dak earning as much as he's earning, because that is not what you pay your quarterback if you are at the start of a rebuild. And let's face it, if they get rid of Micah Parsons, they are starting a rebuild. Keep reading like potential trade proposals. And I can see how they can make some sort of sense for the Cowboys when you accumulate those picks. It's a lot to give up for everybody. And I don't see any of these deals that I think, yeah, do you know what? That's something I think both sides would be happy with. I'm sure he's going to stay a Cowboy. And I'm all prepared for you to get me back on after he's signed with, I don't know, the 49ers or something, and you to play back the bit where I've said, I'm sure they wouldn't trade him to the 49ers.
I mean, I hope they send him to the AFC. I'd definitely take him on the Ravens defensive line. That'd be brilliant. I think talk about a team that's a player away. I mean,
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't say no to that. I'm not sure what it would cost to get him there. Just to entertain that though, are there any teams you seem pretty convinced that he's going to stay in Dallas? But just for argument's sake, if this is the end of him and the Cowboys, and they decide to pick up the phone, listen to whatever is being offered, are there any teams that you personally think you'd like to see him on?
I think he'd
Other
be
than the Bears?
yeah. I wouldn't want the Bears to have to give up all that collateral. I would love to see him there. I saw proposed. So I was on the Athletic, and it was the Packers giving up their first round picks for the next 2 years and Romeo Dobbs. And they say themselves like this is not the sort of deal that the Packers do. This is not what they do. But I think you do that. I think you instantly make the Packers a Super Bowl contender. I think the Cowboys would like to have Romeo Dobbs in his rookie contract. I think the impact he would make for the Packers wouldn't be quite up there with the signing of Reggie White, but I think it would transform that defense and turn that, like, just really take that team to the next level. I would hate to, as a Bears fan, I would hate to see him on the Packers. But speaking as a neutral, I think it's a fit that is just wonderful. But I think the Cowboys would be crazy to do it.
I mean, personally, I mean, I've seen him linked with this before in kind of not based on anything tangible, but in terms of being from Pennsylvania, I know that he's a Philadelphia sports fan outside of the Eagles, which I do find pretty strange growing up. If you
Very
grew up
weird.
a
Very
Cowboys fan
weird.
in Pennsylvania and he goes, I'm pretty sure he's a big Sixers fan, but just for argument's sake, if Howie Roseman picks up the phone and just offers something ridiculous, maybe there's two first rounders, maybe he throws a player in there because they've got enough of them. I mean, I'm not sure who that player would be, but I just think Micah Parsons on the Eagles. I mean, who says no other than
Um,
everyone, every other GM in the league? But
yeah, it would be amazing for the Eagles. The chances of Jerry Jones trading his best player to the Eagles is, yeah, I don't think we're going to see that. If it wasn't a team from within that division, you could imagine the Eagles being like, yeah, okay, this'll probably put us in the Super Bowl the next, 5 of the next 8 years or something. So I love it for them, but I can't imagine a less likely trade for Jerry Jones to make. And you're right, it's super weird for him to have grown up a Cowboys fan. I know that it's like his dad's a Cowboys fan, but to be there in Philadelphia as a Cowboys fan,
that should
that
be studied.
that's amazing.
Yeah, that there's something really. You know what? I think that needs to be investigated further. There's something so off about
Mm,
that. It's like I don't know. It's like growing up in Swansea and being a die-hard Cardiff City fan for no apparent reason. I don't know. It's just some.
parades,
Mm.
back in Philadelphia, and him not being able to enjoy any of that. Obviously, if he'd been drafted by the Eagles, he might have just been completely changed the allegiance. Like, okay, look, I'm a professional now. Cowboys are dead to me. The Eagles, as a Pennsylvania kid, this is great, but he's ended up a Cowboy, and I think he'll want to stay a Cowboy for life. He's got the vibe of someone who will be a Cowboy for a long time, and he'll then have like 2 seasons at the end of his career in Atlanta, and he'll like do absolutely nothing. They'll like overpay a kind of well past his best Micah Parsons, and he just has this kind of bit part role. But until then, he's gonna have a star on his helmet. Surely, surely.
Or a Raven, hopefully. We'll see. I mean, I think looking at it rationally, it would just be so ridiculous to let a player of that caliber leave. But I mean, we saw it happen with Khalil Mack. I mean, I know you mentioned it as a passing comment, but I think trading him to the Niners would just be criminal as well. I mean, putting him on the same defensive line as a Nick Bosa would just
Yeah.
be. I mean, yeah. Imagine starting at QB again. Imagine being a rookie left tackle from the IPP against going up against that defensive line would just be no. It would not be something you'd want to imagine as your debut at all. But just to finish with, I guess just purely because we are exactly 1 month away from the start of the NFL season, we've probably talked about some of them in this episode. But do you have any way too early teams that you're predicting to win the Super Bowl yet?
Yeah, your Baltimore Ravens. I think there's only a handful of teams that can win the Super Bowl, really. Um, and I think we could all sort of predict the sort of names that are going to come out of my mouth. There's three clear contenders in the AFC, so as well as Baltimore, obviously the Chiefs and the Bills. Um, I feel that out of all of those, I think the Ravens have improved the most in the off season. Um, I find it hard to look past the Eagles in the NFC. Um, I the Commanders obviously got to the NFC Championship game. I don't think the Commanders will win as many games this season as they did last year. I think there'll be a little bit of regression. There tends to be regression when you have a team kind of come out of nowhere and win a lot of very close games. And that's not that I don't think the Commanders are good. I think they will be good and I think they will be in the playoffs. But I don't think this is a team that's going to win quite as many games and not win all those close games that they won last year and get to the championship game. I don't think we're going to see that. Much like kind of the way the Lions just kind of became a little bit disappointing in the playoffs. The Lions obviously have had such change in its coordinators. I trust Dan Campbell to pick the right sort of players. He is very much one of those CEO style head coaches where one of the strengths is he hires the right guys. Until proven otherwise, I will assume he is hiring the right guys. He's got a great record with that. Um, but I don't see Detroit being as good. I think they can still win that division. I think the Packers will be better. The 49ers obviously should be better. The reason they were disappointing last season was, injuries. But I'm still not totally convinced that, Christian McCaffrey is going to come back and be the Christian McCaffrey we remember. Generally, running backs of that age who've had a catastrophic injury don't just come back and are fine. So he's got to prove that for me to feel like the 49ers are like legit contenders. I think the Rams are a really good kind of outside bet. In the AFC, beyond those three, like the AFC South makes me angry. What a horrible division that is. I mean, I'm really interested to see Cam Ward. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and the Texans will win that division, with one arm tied behind their back. The Colts quarterback room is just super weird. Anthony Richardson, I've described him as like a roast chicken that you've taken out of the oven like halfway through, and then you're complaining that eating it has made you sick. Like the chicken wasn't ready. So he should
Played
never
like
have been
12
drafted
games in
when he was.
college or something as well. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And at one point, I compared how many touchdown passes he'd thrown in college with how many Bo Nix had thrown. And it was something like Bo Nix had thrown 5 times as many touchdown passes. And I was just using that to illustrate you've got a player who has barely played quarterback and you're expecting him to learn on the job in the NFL? Like, that's not the best place to learn how to do it. Like, Bo Nix has a lower ceiling than Anthony Richardson, but I'm not sure we'll ever see Anthony Richardson's ceiling because he didn't get the chance to develop in the right place. He needed to stay in college and actually play some games, whereas Bo Nix just played forever and got so much experience and is a reliable player because of it. I actually think Daniel Jones will end up starting more games for the Colts than Anthony Richardson will, and maybe he'll even look okay. But like the Texans, I don't see them as a serious contender. The Bengals, there's obviously talent there, but you're in a division with the Ravens, and I think the Ravens are going to win that division. I love watching the Bengals on offense. I hope they can put it together. I hope they can challenge the Ravens. The Steelers are going to send me to sleep. Not interested in the Steelers. The Raiders are not going to win that division, but the Raiders are one of the teams I'm most excited to watch for next season. I don't think anyone's had a better off season than the Raiders. Love Ashton Genty. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Geno Smith, but it's such an un-Raiders move to bring in a boring, reliable quarterback that's just going to make them better. So I think the Raiders are going to surprise some people. I think I've managed to name like half the teams in the NFL one way or another there, but that's just because, like you say, we're a month away and it's pretty much all I'm thinking about. So it's good to just kind of like have this kind of brain dump on you now.
absolutely. I mean, either way, you've named half the teams, so I mean, you've probably said something at some point that's going to come to fruition. So,
Yeah, true,
um,
true.
like I'm glad that you're predicting the Ravens to have an excellent year. I think for me, it's kind of I'm not sure. There always seems to be the issue when it comes to the playoffs in terms of what can't go wrong will go wrong. It's almost like we turn into Spurs when it gets to the playoffs, and it's just whatever happens. I mean, for me personally, I think I admit this is really boring of me, but I can't see past the Eagles. I think how dominant they were all last season, and then how consistent they were putting together great dominant performances in the playoffs as well. And you think they're just gonna, it's pretty much the same team coming back, and you just think, okay, they've still got Saquon for another few years. I mean, however much you can get out of him, great. You've still got Jalen Hurts tied down for the foreseeable. You've still got AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, probably. That's one of the best 1-2 combinations in the league, I guess. And a formidable defense. Yeah, I just think culturally, I mean, they've been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years, and coming out of the NFC, I think they're definitely going to be the team to beat. Then the question is who's going to come out of the AFC, and I think for me, you don't seem to be keen on them particularly, but I think the Bengals. I regret to say, being in the Ravens division, but I think objectively, if Joe Burrow can put together a dominant season, we'll see what will happen. It's almost like it's Joe Burrow versus what's happening above him to a certain
Yeah.
degree. But I do, and there is always that sleeper team though that comes out of nowhere. I think we can always talk about the teams that were good last year. There's always at least one of them that completely drops off, and there's always one that comes out of absolutely nowhere. I mean, I actually think your Chicago Bears. I'm not going to say they're going to go and win the Super Bowl or go to the championship game, but I'm quite optimistic about them. I feel like Caleb Williams definitely showed flashes. I think maybe I'm biased from being at the game they played in London when he had his 4 touchdown performance. I mean, he was rolling out of the pocket. He was making veteran throws over the middle in that game. I mean, I don't know what happened to him in London, but for that game, he looked pretty great. I think as far as rookies go. Second year, new head coach, huge fan of the Ben Johnson appointment, and you'd like to think they can build on that in year two and see where you can go. I mean, maybe if you trade for Micah Parsons too, we'll see what happens. But I'd like to think the Bears will at least be improved. I mean, maybe they make it to the playoffs as a wild card team, or we'll see. But
They
yeah,
should they
it's
should
one's
they
game.
should be improved. They should be improved. Like the coaching was atrocious last year. It was kind of negligent. The coaching that they had, and poor Caleb Williams had 3 different play callers last season as they kind of cycled through people. So he's got to learn a whole new thing right now. Better late than never. Ben Johnson clearly wanted to be there. It's why Ben Johnson stuck around with the Lions last season. He wanted to come to the Bears. He hoped the job was going to be available last year. It wasn't. He managed to bide his time, and it was the only team he considered, and it was the only coach the Bears really wanted. He seems like a great fit. Dennis Allen as the new defensive coordinator. He's got his work cut out for him because there's a lot of holes on that defense. There are so many offensive weapons for the Bears that if Ben Johnson can make use of them, it's going to be a team that's fun to watch no matter what. A bit like with the Bengals, where my question marks are on the defense, not the offense. The Bears will be improved. It's a really tough division. There are 3 teams ahead of them who should have a better shot of winning the division. But top to bottom, that might be the division where the worst team is better than the worst team in any other division, with the exception maybe of the AFC West, which is possibly the best coached league in football. I'm excited to watch the Bears this season. Caleb Williams had certain issues last season, but my God, very few of them felt like they were just obviously his fault. And for anyone who watched all of those Bears games will know that he did so many things right. That game against the Jags, he was on fire that day, and it was a lot of the play calls were very simple, and it just worked really well. The Jags were not great, and he was taking what he was given. And that wasn't happening in a lot of games, and the play calling was different, and it was just so erratic. So I think we saw the potential real Caleb Williams at Wembley that day. I also saw him at Soldier Field in a game the Bears lost, but they really should have won, and he was the best player on the field when they lost to the Packers in November or whenever it was at Soldier Field, when they had a field goal attempt to win it, and just, again, poor coaching. They had the opportunity to just move the ball forward more, and they just decided, no, we'll do it from here. And then the low kick, because it was further out, the kick was lower, it got blocked, and that's just right on the coaches. But it was Caleb Williams that had given them that opportunity. He'd been the best player in that game, and I've managed to see him have 2 games in the flesh last season where he was the best player on the field, and that says something. I'm confident they've got the right guy, and I think he will have a fantastic career as long as he's got the right coaching and the right development.
I mean, Eberflus's time in Chicago, I think, might be just summed up, unfortunately, by the last game. I remember they just let the clock run out for no apparent reason. I
Yeah,
think that was the last, yeah, not to open up old wounds. And I guess whatever, I don't know what it is with the Bears and last minute field goals.
everything kind of built up um, to that Eberflus firing, and if that's the reason that Ben Johnson came in and Ben Johnson is the man, then everything that happened last season was absolutely worth it.
I'd like to see the Bears do well. I feel they've been starved of success for a very long time. Fantastic fan base, fantastic showing also in London last year. But Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today, and I think out of all of our takes, surely 1 or 2 of them have got to be correct. I think we've got to have
Bloody better
hit
be.
we have to have hit on 1 or 2 at least.
Yeah, if it turns out now that like a 30-year-old rugby player comes into the league in the player pathway and becomes an all-star quarterback, then I might just retire and be like, okay,
Or a
I can't
lineman
predict
as
anything.
well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
If you get a prop forward from Saracens who goes to the Patriots, becomes an all pro lineman in the next year, maybe. Yeah,
yeah.
we'll see what
I could see
happens.
it. I could see it.